I welcome Alyson to the stage, and please give a warm welcome. Thank you.
When Derry first asked me to speak today, at first I thought I might not be the best person for it. After giving it some thought, I remembered Martin Luther King Jr. had said, "As my sufferings mounted, I soon realized that there were two ways that I could respond to my situation, either to react with bitterness or seek to transform the suffering into a creative force. I have decided to follow the later course." I'm going to tell you my story today and how those words led me here. My name is Alyson. I'm a trans woman, and that is something I've known about all my life. At times when I was a kid, I would try on some of my mother's clothing or spritz myself with some of her perfume. There was an episode of WKRP in Cincinnati that had a transgender character in it. That's when I realized who I was and what I ultimately wanted to do when I grew up. I was going to transition. I grew up with my stepfather, who had once said that if he found out any of us, my siblings and I, were LGBT, the word he used was far more hateful. He would kill us and the world would be better off. When my mother finally left him and we reconnected with my father and his side of the family, they were very conservative and still are. My grandmother thought LGBT people should be arrested and executed on the spot. I also faced at various times threats of violence from people who didn't like me for who I was. I lived, and still do, in fear of possibly ending up like Brandon, Tina, or Matthew Shepard. In the 90s, I started looking into transitioning, but found it difficult. At that time, I would have gone to a psychiatrist or a psychologist for a year and had to wear the clothing of the gender identified with for a year before they would even consider starting any kind of therapy for it. I planned to transition before I told my family, and with that, the price of everything I would have needed was more than a person in their early 20s could afford, so I did nothing, and that would lead me down a road of dealing with depression and suicidal thoughts. And for years, that just got worse, until I was in my mid-20s and couldn't take it anymore and had my first suicide attempt. One of the psychologists I saw at the time asked if I thought I was a girl. I said no, and at the time because I was afraid he would tell my father about it, and as they talked frequently. The fact that I did not say yes at the time is one of my biggest regrets, if not the biggest regret of my life. So I trudged on in life until I was 46 and had been seeing stories on the news about a celebrity that was older than I was and that they had transitioned late in life. So I started wearing women's clothing and doing makeup subtly, which helped me feel more like myself. Then I found that there were places that could start the therapy without having to see a psychiatrist first. So I started the therapy and finally began feeling like myself and who I should have been, with my body not feeling so alien anymore. In 2021, feeling comfortable with myself for a few years, I was ready to start coming out to my family. First, I was going to talk to my mother and tell her, as she was the one person in my family I was sure it wouldn't have mattered to. At that time, the pandemic had been going on for about a year and would deprive me of that chance of telling my mother, as she passed in January 26th that year from COVID-induced renal failure. When she passed, I was talking to my father, who at the time was living in Hawaii. He said that he wanted to come visit me in Pennsylvania in August that year, but he passed from cancer in July 7th, and I didn't get a chance to tell him either. Between those two events, to make matters even worse, I had lost the job I had for 12 years, and then in September, disaster struck again. I lost my apartment and everything I had. I was on the streets and couch surfing with friends, and as winter in Pennsylvania can get cold, I had some friends let me stay with them for the winter in Sacramento. While I was in Sacramento, my friends and there knew I was transgender, as did my friends and coworkers I had lived in Pennsylvania. So I thought it was time to come out to everyone. When I did, my family stopped talking to me and basically cut me out of their lives. And I would try to get in touch with them, but they would not answer or try to get back to me at a later time. With that, I had lost the last bit of support system I had and was truly alone. Depression and another suicide attempt followed. While I was in the hospital in Sacramento, when it became time to release me, they wanted to release me at first to a religious shelter in San Jose, but with some questioning from me, they found out they would not respect me being transgender. A few days later, they came back to me with a new plan. They gave me printouts for Housing Matters with a name and phone number handwritten on it, bus tickets to Santa Cruz, and info on the nearest T-Mobile store to get an ACP Lifeline phone. When I got to Santa Cruz, it was early for when I was supposed to be at Housing Matters, so I decided to head to the T-Mobile store first to get a phone. When I got there, I was told that the store didn't do the ACP Lifeline phones. I then went to Housing Matters and found out I would have gone on a waiting list and they didn't have space for me. That's when I realized the hospital in Sacramento just looked up shelters, printed out the result, and found that was far enough away so they wouldn't have to see me again. All that started to make me feel suicidal again, but I didn't act on it this time. I told them at Housing Matters what I was thinking, and they called the police, who called the social worker. From there, I went to Telecare, then stayed at the Encompass facility that was part of their integrated behavioral health program. After I timed out of that program, I was staying at the Salvation Army shelter in Watsonville, but still coming back to Santa Cruz for medical appointments. That's where I ran into someone I knew who told me about the Homeless Garden Project. I talked to my health care coordinator about it, and she got me in touch with Evan, who reached out to me, and I've been working there ever since. Working here has given me a sense of normalcy, like my life is getting back on track. Working at the Homeless Garden Project, I'm planting seeds and transforming my life. My transition is moving along, and I'm working towards finding stable housing situation and a permanent job at a place that accepts me for who I am, like they do at the Homeless Garden Project. I work at this shop at this time of year, using my creative force and letting me give me the strength to get my goals done. I also remember that Dr. King had stated, "Violence is immoral because it thrives on hatred rather than love." So I decided to live my life with love, and my life has been more peaceful, and I can be someone that my mother would have been proud of. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a national holiday that celebrates the life and legacy of a man's hopes in healing America through greater equality for all people, regardless of race. Thank you.